What happens when a late-night host refuses to play along with a celebrity's carefully crafted narrative? Tonight we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in television history, where Stephen Colbert's commitment to honest journalism collided head-on with Meghan Markle's expectations of a friendly chat. This is the story of how a routine interview turned into a television meltdown that had security escorting a former royal off the set. But before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because, trust me, you're going to want to discuss this one. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had become known for its blend of comedy and serious political commentary, but nothing could have prepared the veteran host for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. Meghan Markle had been booked as a guest to promote her latest philanthropic venture, and the show's producers expected a standard celebrity interview, the kind where gentle questions lead to rehearsed answers and everyone walks away happy. Stephen sat behind his desk, his signature grin in place as the show returned from commercial break. The audience buzzed with anticipation as Meghan walked onto the stage, waving graciously to the crowd. She wore an elegant navy blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, her smile perfectly practiced for the cameras. "Welcome back to The Late Show," Stephen announced, his voice carrying its usual warmth. "I'm here with Meghan Markle. And Meghan, thank you so much for being here tonight." "Thank you for having me, Stephen," Meghan replied, settling into the guest chair with the poise of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times before. "It's wonderful to be here." The interview began predictably enough. Stephen asked about her charitable work, her life in California, and her various projects. Meghan delivered her responses with the smooth precision of a politician, each answer carefully crafted to hit the right emotional notes while revealing absolutely nothing of substance. But Stephen Colbert hadn't built his career on softballs. As the conversation progressed, his questions began to probe deeper, and that's when the carefully constructed facade began to crack. "Now, Meghan," Stephen said, leaning forward slightly, "you've spoken extensively about your commitment to authentic storytelling and truth-telling. Given that, I'm curious about some of the inconsistencies that have emerged between various interviews you've given over the past few years." The smile on Meghan's face flickered for just a moment, like a candle in a sudden breeze. "I'm not sure what you mean by inconsistencies, Stephen. I've always been consistent in my truth." "Well, for instance," Stephen continued, his tone remaining conversational but his eyes sharp, "in your interview with Oprah, you mentioned that you had very little preparation for royal life, that you didn't even Google Harry before your first date. But in a previous interview with a British magazine, you described yourself as someone who had followed the royal family closely since childhood. How do you reconcile those two statements?" The audience fell silent, sensing the shift in the room's energy. This wasn't the gentle lob they had expected, and Meghan's media training hadn't prepared her for this level of scrutiny on what was supposed to be a friendly platform. "Stephen," Meghan said, her voice taking on a slight edge, "I think you're mischaracterizing what I said. Context matters, and I've always been truthful about my experiences." "I'm sure you have," Stephen replied smoothly, "but I'm reading directly from the transcripts here. In the Oprah interview, you said, and I quote, 'I didn't grow up knowing much about the royal family.' But in Hello magazine you said, 'I've been fascinated by the royal family since I was a little girl, especially Princess Diana.' Those seem like pretty different statements to me." Meghan's posture stiffened, and her media-trained smile became more forced. "I think you're taking things out of context, Stephen. Those interviews were conducted under very different circumstances, and the questions were framed differently. But the facts don't really change based on the circumstances, do they?" Stephen pressed gently. "Either you knew about the royal family or you didn't. Either you researched Harry or you didn't. I'm not trying to be difficult here, I'm just trying to understand." The tension in the studio was palpable now. The audience members exchanged glances, unsure whether they were witnessing good journalism or watching a train wreck in slow motion. Meghan's hands gripped the arms of her chair slightly tighter, and her breathing became more deliberate. "Stephen," she said, her voice carrying a warning tone that anyone familiar with difficult interviews would recognize, "I came here tonight to talk about my charitable work and the positive impact we're trying to make in the world. I didn't come here to be interrogated about past interviews that have been taken out of context by the media." Stephen nodded understandingly, but he didn't back down. "And I appreciate that, Meghan. I really do. Your charitable work is important, and we'll definitely talk about that, but you've built your public platform on being a voice for authenticity and truth. Don't you think your audience deserves that same authenticity when it comes to consistency in your own statements?" "My audience," Meghan replied, her voice rising slightly, "appreciates honesty, which is what I've always given them. What they don't appreciate is being subjected to gotcha journalism when they're trying to do good work in the world." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Stephen's eyebrows raised slightly, but his expression remained calm and professional. This was the moment when many hosts might have backed down, offered an apology, and moved on to safer territory. But Stephen Colbert had built his reputation on not backing down from difficult conversations. "Gotcha journalism?" Stephen repeated, his tone curious rather than defensive. "Meghan, I'm literally just asking you to explain statements you made in recorded interviews. If asking someone to clarify their own words is gotcha journalism, then I think we might have different definitions of what journalism is supposed to be." The camera caught the flash of anger that crossed Meghan's face before she could control it. Her media training was clearly warring with her natural instincts, and the natural instincts were starting to win. "You know what, Stephen?" Meghan said, her voice now carrying a sharpness that cut through the studio's atmosphere like a blade. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about what kind of interview this was supposed to be. My team was very clear about the topics we'd be discussing tonight." Stephen's expression remained unchanged, but those who knew him could see the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated he was not pleased with the direction this was heading. "Your team spoke with our producers, yes, but Meghan, this is the Late Show, not a promotional platform. We do journalism here, even when we're having fun." "Journalism?" Meghan's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Is that what you call ambushing your guests with questions designed to make them look bad? Because that's not journalism, Stephen. That's tabloid behavior." The audience was now completely silent, the tension so thick you could practically see it in the air. Stephen leaned back in his chair, his demeanor still professional but his voice carrying a new firmness. "Meghan, I need to stop you right there. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and celebrities from every walk of life. I've never ambushed anyone, and I'm certainly not doing it now. I'm asking you direct questions about statements you made publicly. That's not an ambush. That's accountability." "Accountability?" Meghan's voice rose another notch, and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "To whom? To you? To this audience? I don't owe anyone an explanation for living my truth, Stephen. I came here as a courtesy, to talk about the work I'm doing to make the world better, and instead you're treating me like I'm on trial." Stephen's patience, legendary among his colleagues for its depth, was clearly being tested. "Meghan, nobody's putting you on trial, but when you build a career on telling your story, and when parts of that story don't align with previous versions, people have a right to ask questions. That's not persecution. That's just how public discourse works." "Public discourse?" Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling back slightly. The sudden movement caused a ripple of surprise through the audience. "This isn't discourse, Stephen. This is exactly the kind of behavior that drove me and my family out of the UK. I thought American media would be different, that there would be some basic level of respect and decency." Stephen remained seated, his calm demeanor becoming even more pronounced in contrast to Meghan's agitation. "Meghan, please sit down. We can have this conversation respectfully, but we do need to have it. You've made very serious allegations about people and institutions, and when there are inconsistencies in how you've presented those allegations, it's reasonable to ask for clarification." "Reasonable?" Meghan's voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, the polished exterior gave way to something raw and desperate. "There's nothing reasonable about this. You invited me here under false pretenses. You're twisting my words. And now you're trying to gaslight me into thinking this is normal behavior." The accusation of gaslighting caused Stephen's eyebrows to rise sharply. Anyone who had followed his career knew that integrity was his defining characteristic, and attacking that integrity was like poking a sleeping bear. "Meghan, I need you to be very careful about the accusations you're making right now. I have never, in my entire career, invited a guest under false pretenses. You're here to promote your work, and I'm asking you legitimate questions about the platform you've built. That's not gaslighting, that's journalism." "Stop saying that word," Meghan snapped, her composure completely shattered now. "This isn't journalism. This is character assassination. You're trying to destroy my credibility because you know I'm a threat to the establishment narrative." A murmur went through the audience at this outburst. Stephen's team in the control room was frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, but Stephen himself seemed determined to see this through. "Meghan, I'm going to ask you one more time to sit down so we can have a civilized conversation. You're not a threat to anyone, you're a guest on my show, and I'm treating you with the same respect I'd show any guest." "Respect?" Meghan's laugh was bitter now, all pretense of media training abandoned. "You call this respect? Ambushing me with gotcha questions, trying to make me look like a liar in front of your audience? This is exactly the kind of toxic behavior that forced me to leave my entire life behind." Stephen's voice remained steady, but there was now an edge of steel in it. "Meghan, I'm not making you look like anything. I'm asking you to explain your own words. If that's uncomfortable for you, maybe the issue isn't with my questions." "Don't you dare!" Meghan pointed a finger at Stephen, her voice rising to a level that was clearly audible throughout the studio. "Don't you dare turn this around on me. I know exactly what you're doing. This is the same playbook they used in the UK, the same tactics designed to silence women who dare to speak their truth." "Meghan," Stephen said firmly, "I'm going to need you to lower your voice and sit down. We're on live television, and you're making a scene that's not helping anyone." "A scene?" Meghan's voice hit a pitch that made several audience members wince. "I'm making a scene? I'm standing up for myself against a bully who's trying to humiliate me on national television, and you're telling me I'm making a scene?" The control room was in chaos now, with producers debating whether to cut away, but Stephen held up a subtle hand signal indicating he wanted to continue. He had dealt with difficult guests before, but this was rapidly approaching unprecedented territory. "Meghan, I am not a bully, and I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm trying to do my job, which is to ask meaningful questions of people who have significant public platforms. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, then maybe you shouldn't be seeking that level of influence." The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Her face flushed red, and for a moment she seemed genuinely speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was barely controlled rage. "How dare you question my right to influence? How dare you suggest that I can't handle scrutiny? I've handled more scrutiny than you could ever imagine, from people far more powerful than you." "Then this should be easy for you," Stephen replied calmly. "Just answer the questions." "I don't have to answer anything to you," Meghan shot back, her voice echoing through the studio. "I don't owe you explanations. I don't owe your audience explanations, and I certainly don't owe the media any more of my truth than I've already given." Stephen leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming more serious. "Meghan, you've built your entire post-royal career on telling your story and asking people to believe you. But belief requires trust, and trust requires consistency. When your story keeps changing, people have a right to ask why." "My story hasn't changed," Meghan screamed, causing several audience members to actually jump in their seats. My story is my story, and it's the truth, and I won't sit here and let you or anyone else tear it apart for entertainment. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence after Meghan's outburst, broken only by the sound of her heavy breathing and the nervous shuffling of the audience. Stephen sat perfectly still for a moment, his professional composure intact despite the chaos unfolding before him. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and calm, a stark contrast to the emotional storm raging across from him. "Meghan," he said quietly, "I think we need to take a step back here. This conversation has gotten away from both of us, and I think it would be best if we moved on to discussing your charitable work, which is why you came here tonight." "No," Meghan said sharply, her voice still elevated but now carrying a different kind of intensity. "We're not moving on. We're not pretending this didn't happen. You started this, Stephen, and now you're going to finish it. You want to talk about consistency? Let's talk about the consistency of how women like me are treated by men like you." Stephen's expression hardened slightly. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on treating all guests with equal respect, regardless of gender, race, or status. The implication in Meghan's words struck at the core of his professional identity. "Meghan, I treat all my guests the same way. I ask hard questions because that's what journalism requires. Gender has nothing to do with it. Gender has everything to do with it," Meghan fired back, beginning to pace behind her chair like a caged animal. "You wouldn't dare speak to a man the way you're speaking to me. You wouldn't challenge a man's story the way you're challenging mine. This is textbook misogyny, Stephen, and the fact that you can't see it makes it even worse." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Stephen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and several audience members gasped audibly. To accuse Stephen Colbert, known for his advocacy for women's rights and equality, of misogyny was not just wrong, it was inflammatory in a way that threatened to derail everything. "That's not true, and you know it," Stephen replied, his voice still controlled but now carrying an unmistakable edge. "I've interviewed countless women in positions of power, and I've asked them the same kinds of questions I'm asking you. Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Supreme Court justices, world leaders. The questions don't change based on gender, Meghan. They change based on the claims being made. Don't you dare compare me to those women," Meghan snapped, her finger pointing accusingly at Stephen again. "Those women never had to deal with the level of racism and harassment that I've faced. Those women never had their entire lives destroyed by a vindictive institution and a complicit media." Stephen took a deep breath, and those who knew him well could see that he was reaching the limits of his legendary patience. "Meghan, I'm not comparing you to anyone. I'm simply pointing out that difficult questions are part of public life. If you're going to make serious allegations about racism and institutional harassment, people are going to want evidence and consistency in your account." "Evidence?" Meghan's voice cracked again, but this time with fury rather than emotion. "What kind of evidence would satisfy you, Stephen? What kind of proof do you need that I was treated differently because of the color of my skin? Do you want photographs of the racist comments? Do you want recordings of the private conversations where they discussed my children's skin color?" "I want consistency in your story," Stephen replied firmly. "Because right now, different versions of events keep emerging, and that makes it hard for people to know what really happened." "Different versions?" Meghan was shouting again now, her voice echoing off the studio walls. "There's only one version, Stephen, my version, because I'm the one who lived it. I'm the one who suffered through it. I'm the one who had to leave everything behind to protect my family." Stephen leaned forward, his voice becoming more serious. "Meghan, nobody's questioning that you had difficult experiences. But when you tell that story differently in different forums, people are going to notice. That's not persecution. That's just human nature." "Human nature?" Meghan laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and grating. Is it human nature to tear down a woman who's trying to rebuild her life? Is it human nature to question every word that comes out of my mouth while giving everyone else the benefit of the doubt? Everyone else doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, Stephen said, his patience finally beginning to fray. Everyone else gets asked the same kinds of questions you're being asked. The difference is, most people answer them. Most people don't have to live with the consequences of their answers, Meghan shot back. Most people don't have every word. They say dissected and analyzed and used against them by people who have already made up their minds. Stephen stood up slowly, his full height imposing even in the face of Meghan's rage. Meghan, I think we need to end this interview. This isn't productive for anyone, and it's certainly not the kind of conversation that helps your cause or mine. Oh, now you want to end it? Meghan's voice rose to a near shriek. Now that you've gotten what you wanted? Now that you've humiliated me in front of your audience and made me look unstable? You don't get to just shut this down when it becomes inconvenient. For you. I'm not shutting anything down, Stephen replied calmly. I'm recognizing that this conversation has become counterproductive, and I'm trying to preserve whatever dignity we can for both of us. Dignity? Meghan was practically screaming now. You destroyed my dignity the moment you started this ambush. You destroyed it when you decided to treat me like a criminal instead of a guest. There's no dignity left to preserve, Stephen. You've seen to that. At this point, Stephen made a subtle gesture to someone off camera, and within moments, to security. Personnel appeared at the edge of the stage. They didn't approach Meghan directly, but their presence was unmistakable. The audience, already on edge from the confrontation, began to murmur among themselves. "Are you having me removed?" Meghan asked, her voice suddenly dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Are you actually having security escort me out because I refuse to play along with your little game?" "I'm ensuring everyone's safety," Stephen replied, evenly. "This situation has escalated beyond what anyone should have to endure, including you." "Don't you dare make this about my safety," Meghan hissed. "This is about control. This is about a powerful man silencing a woman who wouldn't be silenced. This is about you getting rid of me because I called you out on your behavior." Stephen looked directly at Meghan, his expression sad rather than angry. "Meghan, I genuinely hope you find the peace you're looking for, but this isn't the way to find it." "Peace?" Meghan's voice cracked one final time. "There's no peace for people like me, Stephen. There's only the fight, and I'll keep fighting until people see the truth." As security gently but firmly escorted Meghan toward the exit, she continued to speak, her voice carrying across the stunned studio. "This is exactly what they did to me before. This is exactly how they silence women who dare to speak truth to power. Remember this moment, because this is how they treat people who won't stay in their place." The studio doors closed behind her, leaving Stephen alone on stage with a completely silent audience. He stood there for a moment, collecting himself, before returning to his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for what you just witnessed. That's not the kind of interview anyone wants to have, and it's certainly not the kind of television we want to make. Sometimes, when we're trying to do our jobs as journalists, conversations go in directions nobody expects." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I want to be clear about something. I respect Meghan Markle's right to tell her story, and I respect her experiences. But I also believe that when someone builds a platform on their story, that story should be consistent and truthful. That's not too much to ask, and it's not unfair to expect." Stephen took a breath, his composure fully restored. "We'll be right back after this commercial break, and when we return, we'll have some music to help everyone reset from what just happened here tonight." As the show cut to commercial, Stephen sat quietly at his desk, the weight of what had just occurred settling over the studio. He had handled the situation with as much grace as possible, but there was no denying that television history had just been made, and not in a way anyone would have preferred. That's the story of how Meghan Markle's carefully constructed media image finally cracked under the pressure of real journalism, and how Stephen Colbert showed exactly why he's considered one of the most respected voices in late-night television. What did you think of how Stephen handled this situation? Was he too hard on Meghan? Or was he just doing his job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that you won't see covered anywhere else.